Well, good morning, everyone. And to our Canadian viewers joining us from Victoria to St. John's, grab your double double, sit back, and take a deep breath. Sure, it's quiet here. The government is on holiday, and the coffee is hot.
But we know why you're really here. You're here for the same reason people slow down to look at a car wreck. You want to see what's happening in the insane asylum downstairs.
So let's pivot. Good morning, America. We need to talk about your garbage. Specifically, the garbage your Department of Justice just tried to hide under the rug yesterday.
Yeah, today is December 20th. The big deadline was supposed to be yesterday. And frankly, we can smell the rot all the way up here in Ontario, Canada.
So pull up a chair because the Epstein dump just happened and it's about, as transparent as a brick wall.
You know, there are two sets of rules in this world, one for us and the people watching this show, and one for the people who are mentioned in the files we're about to talk about.
If you or I missed a federal deadline to turn over evidence regarding a global sex trafficking ring, we'd be in handcuffs before breakfast.
But in Washington, you just issue a press release and buy a few more weeks to warm up the black Sharpie while you go golfing.
So consider this a reality check from the north because the smell of corruption is drifting across the border. And you know what? It reeks.
So this is our video to you. America, get your shit together.
All right, let's look at what exactly happened yesterday. The Justice Department released the Epstein files.
Yeah, released. I'm sorry, but did anyone actually expect the full truth to show up on time? Neatly labeled and inconvenient to very powerful people?
They had a deadline, a law, a clock, a requirement. And what we got was a partial drop and a promise of more later. It's the same old stall 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks.
And let's be specific for a second. Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. It became law on November 19th, 2025.
Now, that law wasn't a suggestion. It set a hard deadline to release classified Epstein related records. That deadline hit yesterday, Friday, December 19th, 2025.
And surprise, surprise, the DOJ didn't fully comply. Instead, they said they wouldn't meet the deadline and that more documents would come out in the next few weeks.
Can you translate bureaucracy to English? Well, I can. The law says release it, and the DOJ says we'll get around to it once we've redacted everything that we don't like.
This isn't about a photo proving a crime. It's about a government missing a legal deadline and releasing a batch that is so heavily redacted, it looks like modern art.
And by released, they mean some files, some photos, some pages, and a whole lot of black ink. If you're wondering why people on the left, the right, the center are furious, that's why.
Because the question isn't what's in the files. The question is who gets to ignore the law with no consequences.
Listen, they write the rules to protect themselves. We use the rules to expose them. And then when the rules don't suit them, what do? They change the rules.
And that is the scandal. We know what powerful men did to these young girls. They did terrible things. And we know that these young girls were groomed. Now it's time for these victims to finally have their day in court.
So why are women like Pam Bondi, Laura Loomer, and Caroline Levitt running interference for a missed legal deadline? What woman wouldn't want retribution for abused girls? I just can't wrap my head around all of that. We always ask, what happens to regular people when the law gets ignored? Well, it's simple. They get arrested.
But what happens when powerful, corrupt men break the law? Nothing.
The MAGA Republicans say, oh yeah, well what about Bill Clinton? He's in the files. And our answer is always the same. Okay.
Yeah, if Bill Clinton is in the files, he should face punishment. If the Pope is in the files, he should face punishment.
This isn't about left and right. This is about right and wrong. And these days, the political right seems to always find itself on the wrong side of the law and common decency.
Now, I can hear the comments already. Hey, Canada, mind your own business. Why do you care what happens in the USA?
Well, we care because your instability does not stay at home.
When the U.S. institutions crumble, the damage spreads. Trade, security, alliances, the global economy, everything.
It's like living in an apartment building. If the guy downstairs decides to start a bonfire in his living room, I don't just say, well, that's his living room, no problem. I worry about the whole building burning down.
And frankly, we can see the copycats up here. We're watching it all happen in real time.
When an American president tramples norms without consequences, certain politicians in Ottawa don't get horrified, they get ideas.
They see that good faith rules can be replaced with raw power. They see that if you yell loud enough, the laws they just don't apply to you.
So, no, we're not butting in. We're actually paying attention because we live next door to the biggest influence on the planet.
And right now, that influence is teaching the world that laws are optional if you have enough money.
So, let's actually go back to the mechanics of this cover up because that's what a rolling release really is. It's a cover up in slow motion.
Lawmakers from both parties are calling this a failure to comply. Chuck Schumer is out there saying the administration is breaking the law.
Fine, that's great. Good words, Chuck. But if you truly believe the law is being violated, then stop treating it like a press conference and start treating it like an enforcement problem.
Exactly. We get angry social media posts, strongly worded letters. We demand, we urge, we call on. But what do they do next?
The DOJ didn't just miss the deadline. Reporting says they also missed the requirement to provide a timely explanation for what is being withheld.
That was a safety valve. The law said if you hide something, you have 15 days to explain why. And they didn't even do that.
So spare me the PR there, Chuck. This isn't a paperwork problem, it's a power problem.
And for anyone saying, well, Dave and Deb, they need time for redactions. They need to protect the survivors. And yes, protecting survivors is real and necessary.
But there's a real difference between protecting a victim's name and blacking out entire pages of context to protect a politician's career. It's like they're laughing at us. How can they think that this is even acceptable?
Yeah, reporters are seeing full pages of black ink. That's ridiculous.
And it's not helping that Trump barely appears in this initial batch, even though his social connection to Epstein has been documented for years.
Now, I'm not saying the lack of photos proves guilt. That's not how evidence works. But I am saying that selective disclosure is how suspicion spreads.
Exactly. If you want the public to trust the outcome, you don't do half measures. You don't do check back later. You do the full release with survivor protections on a firm schedule.
Because when the government plays games with disclosure, the public stops believing anything. And that's how corruption wins.
And let's not forget what this is actually about. This wasn't a rumor mill. This was a criminal trafficking scheme.
It put Ghislaine Maxwell in federal prison. It put Epstein under federal indictment before he died in custody.
And isn't it something how the most sensitive pieces of this story keep landing in the same place? Delays, missing systems, blacked out pages.
Maxwell gets moved to a minimum security camp. Epstein dies in custody on a suicide watch that failed with cameras that didn't work, all during the Trump presidency.
The official finding was suicide enabled by serious jail failures. That's from the DOJ's own Inspector General.
And now the law demands disclosure, and we get partial releases with heavy redactions.
The public is allowed to be furious when accountability keeps slipping away. Why are we still asking these questions? It makes no sense to me.
Because the system is working exactly as designed. It protects the club. And you and I, we're just not in it.
Now, here's the $64,000 question. When is America going to wake up?
Because here in Canada, it's as clear as day. A law is passed, the deadline hits, the DOJ doesn't comply. And instead of consequences, we get hollow statements.
And to our friends in America, you deserve better than a government that treats the truth like a classified secret.
And can I ask, when are you going to get loud and angry? Because if you let them bury this today, they're going to bury something worse tomorrow.
So when the law says release it, and the DOJ says we'll get around it once we've redacted everything that we don't like, you know what? That's not leadership. That's corruption to the core. Because when the government plays games with disclosure, the public stops believing anything. But we have to ask the question that's screaming in everyone's brain right now. How is this even normal? Why isn't every news channel running this 24/7? Why aren't the streets filled with millions of people every single day?
I'll tell you why, Dave. Because they've normalized the abnormal for the past 10 years. They've fired a fire hose of corruption at you for so long that you're drowning in it. And when every scandal, it becomes a nothing scandal.
Yep, they want you to look at the Department of Justice cover up and shrug. They want you to say, oh, just another Friday in Washington. No, that is how democracies die. They die when you get too tired to fight back.
And frankly, we're tired up here too. I look at the calendar and it's December 2025. Do you realize how long we've been doing this dance with one man?
Since 2015, 10 years, a full decade, he has stolen 10 years of our life.
Think about that. 10 years of the headlines being about him. 10 years of the dinner table arguments being about him. 10 years of anxiety, the tweets, the threats, the investigations, the stalls, the delays.
He has sucked the oxygen out of the entire world for a decade. We could have talked about healthcare. We could have talked about climate change. We could have talked about the future. But instead, we spent 10 years talking about his ego, his crimes, and his cover-ups.
And we are done. We don't want to hear about him anymore. We don't want to analyze his strategy anymore. We don't want to wait for another ruling or another appeal. I'm tired of people saying, oh, that's just Trump. We've had our elbows up for a year, America. And after yesterday, we're not putting them down.
Get your house in order, America, because we're tired of smelling the smoke up here.
So thanks for watching, everyone. That'll do it for today, and we hope you have a great holiday season. We'll be back tomorrow with more truth.
Ciao for now.